your alternator, you know that's hooked up to your battery, right? So it's not exposed, frayed, or corroded. Okay. So I have my airline holder properly mounted and secured, all hardware intact. Airlines to and from are not cracked or leaking. I have my electrical harness. My electrical harness is properly mounted and secured. All wires to and from are not exposed or frayed. Me, I like to work in a Z pattern. So as soon as I hit this, everything that's on my firewall, I hit a Z pattern where I go top to middle to bottom, just like that, a zigzag pattern. So from my electrical harness, I would come all the way to my radiators properly mounted and secured, top, bottom, left to right. Hoses, this is my radiator hose, top on this side, bottom on the opposite side, properly mounted and secured, good clamp, not cracked or leaking. My air condenser is in the front, properly mounted and secured, top, bottom, left to right. It is also not cracked or leaking. I have my shroud properly mounted and secured, top, bottom, left to right. Not hanging, not touching my fan blades, not obstructing my fan blades. It is also properly mounted and secured, all hardware intact. I have my intake here and my outs on the other side, properly mounted and secured, top, bottom. Good boot, proper clamps on both sides, not cracked or leaking. I have my top radiator mount here and my bottom radiator mount down here. On both sides, they are properly mounted and secured. They are not missing any hardware and they are not cracked or broken. So I just hit all this and I hit both of these, since there's two, one on this side, one on the opposite side. I killed it, so that way I don't have to mention it ever again. I have my power steering reservoir. This is my check, this is my fill. Good proper seal. It is not cracked or leaking. All hoses to and from my reservoir are not cracked or leaking as well. This is my engine fill and my engine check. Both properly mounted and secured. They are both not leaking as well. From here, I go to my alternator. My alternator is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked, broken, or missing any hardware. All wires to and from my alternator are not exposed or frayed or corroded. I have my AC pump underneath. It is properly mounted and secured. It is also not cracked, broken, or missing any hardware or leaking. From here, I have my air compressor properly mounted and secured. This is my governor. My governor is properly mounted and secured. If you follow this blue line down to my air compressor, the governor is adjusted to my air compressor. My air compressor is properly mounted and secured and not cracked, leaking, and it is gear driven. Hoses to and from, the hose to and from that air compressor is not cracked or leaking. Behind that would be my power steering pump. It is properly mounted and secured. It is also not cracked or leaking. And also gear driven as well. I have my starter that's mounted back there as well. My starter is properly mounted and secured. Wires to and from are also not exposed, or frayed, or corroded. So I just tackled compressor, power steering pump, and the starter all in one shot back there. I have my frame from front to the middle of my cab, nice and straight on both sides, not cracked, bent or broken, or any aftermarket welds, illegal aftermarket welds. I have my shaft, my steering shaft, properly mounted and secured. It is nice and straight, not bent, broken, or missing. I have my boot properly mounted and secured. It is also not torn or leaking, allowing any toxic fumes to enter the cab. I have my, what are these called? Okay. I have my U-joints properly mounted and secured, internally greased. All hardware is intact, not missing. I have my steering box properly mounted and secured. It is also not missing any hardware. I have my pitman arm, my drag link, and my upper steering arm, all intact, nice and straight, not bent, broken, or cracked. Castle nuts are in place. These are castle nuts because it looks like the tower of a castle, right? Castle nuts. Cotter pins are also in place. I have good rubber seal in between the pitman arm and the steering arm. Good rubber seal to prevent that metal to metal friction. I have my leaf spring mount up front, my leaf spring mount hanger in the back. Both are properly mounted and secured. All hardware intact. They are not bent, broken, or missing. I have my leaf springs properly mounted and secured, nice and straight, not bent, broken, or missing, or shifted. I have my shock absorber properly mounted and secured. It is also not bent, broken, or leaking. I have my U-bolts. U-bolts are properly mounted and secured to my axle. Not missing any hardware, nice and straight, not bent, broken, or twisted. Okay. My axle is nice and straight from wheel to wheel, not bent, broken, or missing. My tie rod's also nice and straight from wheel to wheel. It is also not bent, broken, or missing. Okay. Axle, tie rod. I have my air line that goes to my brake chamber. It is also not missing any hardware. It is not cracked or leaking. I have my ABS electrical line going to my brake, and it is also not exposed or frayed. This is my brake chamber, properly mounted and secured. It is not missing or leaking. This is my slack adjuster and my push rod. Push rod's allowed up to 1 inch of play, okay, in and out freely. It is nice and straight, not bent or broken. I have my slack adjuster. It's properly mounted and secured. It is also not broken or leaking. Underneath to adjust is DOT 1 inch approved. It's 90 degrees out or 1/4 inch turn. In here I have my brake drum. Brake drum is properly mounted and secured. It is also not cracked, broken, or missing any hardware. No discoloration that would indicate any overheating. I have my brake shoe. Is nice, mounted properly, and it is not shifted. There's also no discoloration on my shoe, which would indicate also heating, overheating and whatnot. Both of them are free of oil and debris, and I'm allowed up to 1/4 inch of shoe. I have the inner rim and the outer rim. Good proper seal to my tire. Not bent, broken, cracked, and no aftermarket welds on the rims. I have my tires free of A, B, C, D. It's abrasions, bubbles, cracks, or dry rot. Even tread all the way across on both steering tires. I'm allowed up to 4/32 on the steering of thread. Cannot be recapped or retreaded. I have my valve stem. Where's it? Down there. Valve stem's nice and straight, properly mounted. It is also not missing. The valve stem could only be checked with the commercial pressure air gauge. I have all my lug nuts accounted for. not missing, broken, cracked, shiny, which would indicate broken, rusted, which would indicate loose. I have my oil hub properly mounted and secured. It is also not leaking. This is my check, my fill, and a drain. On the Volvo, you'll see the drain plug. Also not missing any hardware and nice intact. So from my leaf spring mount to my leaf spring hanger, from my frame to the outer lug nut is all the same on this side as it is on the opposite side, except for the steering linkage. Now I'm ready to move on to the passenger side. What? No, the steering linkage is the pitman arm, the drag link, and the upper steering arm. Yes. Pitman arm, drag link, steering arm. This is the only difference with that. The drive shaft is back here.
What did you take pictures of?
Oh, the steering shaft?
Take pictures of?
Huh?
What did you take pictures of?
Everything?
This is all part of your steering wheel.
I was smart.
So when you say, it's the same. It's the same except for my steering linkage. You can just go like this, my steering linkage. You can just go like this.
No. See?
Yeah, just say my steering linkage.
Alright.
So when you do that, he just brought a good point, you know? Because right now what I did is I pointed to this 3 items here, right? When you say from the leaf spring mount to the leaf spring hanger, from the frame to the outer lug nuts, is the same as it is on the opposite side, except for my steering linkage. You could just go like this, because all of this that you're pointing to is part of the steering linkage. Okay? So just go like this. Okay?
Okay.
Don't just point to stuff, because then you'll have to go here, 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 here. Just go. If you do a quick swipe right here, my steering linkage. Now I'm ready to move on to the other side.
Cool. You got a picture right there.
That's a good point right there. Yeah. Fucking Matrix and shit. So on this side, I have my air filter properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or leaking. I have my boot. This right here is your boot, properly mounted and secured, good clamp. It is also not cracked or leaking. And I also have my fuel filter properly mounted and secured. All hoses to and from my fuel filter is not cracked or leaking as well. Recommendations to change is every 90 days on both air and fuel filter. I have the 4 items that is serpentine belt driven, which is my fan, which all blades are accounted for and not cracked or missing. I have my water pump, which is another serpentine belt driven item. My alternator and AC pump are both as well serpentine belt driven. They are all properly mounted and secured, not leaking, no wires are exposed or frayed. My serpentine belt is not cracked, frayed, and allowed up to 3/4. You don't have to reach in there, but you just tell them allowed up to 3/4 of an inch plate on the serpentine belt. Now, I have my coolant reservoir. Right here in front is my check. This is my fill, properly mounted and secured. Good fluid levels. It is also not cracked or leaking. From the leaf spring mount to my leaf spring hanger, from the frame to the outer lug nut, like I said, on the opposite side is the same, except for the steering linkage on the driver's side. Now this concludes my engine compartment I'm ready to move on to the next test.